Hidden Object Guru here, joined by...
The Gun Wrangler.
And we're back for, that's right, some delicious Viscera cleaning up. Until, either he gets a PS4, or I get a PC copy of Nazi Zombie Army 4. Which I'm very excited for him to play, but he does not have a PS4 at the moment.
Yes. Well, you could always join the PC Master Race.
What do you think I'm playing this on? But I'm not in control in what platform I get sent copies of games on. That's not my thing. Like, they get to decide what they want to send me. So they send me it on PS4, I play it on PS4.
Speaking of Master Races, we're here today to
work.
talk about The Man in the High Castle.
Season 2.
Ugh.
Alright, so... when we first started talking about Season 2, we're talking about the whole rest of the season here. When we first... I asked you a big question, and you did not want to answer it for me, and now I know why. I'm like,
Yeah.
Every single thing about the character of Joe's dad makes it 100% clear that he is Albert Speer. Like, every bit of his characterization, the actor they've hired, Sebastian Roche, even has that kind of look to him. I mean, this is a man, Albert Speer, who's been played by Rutger Hauer in the past. Like, he just has that look. So it's like, every single detail about the the character, you're like, this is obviously supposed to be Albert Speer. Why are they not calling him Albert Speer when they're calling all of the other Nazis by their own names? And the answer is, because all of the other Nazis they call by their names were executed in disgrace. Whereas Albert Speer, got away with it and has a large extended family that might have a problem.
Large extended litigious family.
Which might be offended by the way the show depicts him as the real villainous Nazi behind everything.
Yep.
Wow.
I mean, I have so many problems.
Yeah.
Frank is a little wiener.
Is
Juliana.
it just me, or is Frank the most infuriating character on television?
Yes.
He just won't... Dude, you have to do stuff to get along in the world. You just have to, okay?
You don't have to do a lot, but literally something.
Yes, and it's like, you keep almost getting your friends killed by your...
And I believe in this season, he does in fact get several of his friends killed.
He does, yes. But,
And last season, he got a whole bunch of his family killed.
Oh, that one wasn't his fault. That one's all on Juliana's sister. Like, he was not responsible for what happened to his family in the first season.
Yeah.
Like, it would be quite a stretch to call him on that one. But yes, you're absolutely right that he causes a lot of problems this year. And while it's viscerally satisfying to see him, like, shooting up a Japanese consulate, that is satisfying. Like, the trip we take to get there
is so long and so boring.
Oh, it is. Oh, his story is just so slowly paced. And I gotta say, this show has some of the most contrivance-based writing you are just ever gonna see.
Like, it has all these fantastic ideas, but it does them all so poorly.
Yeah, I think that's the best way of describing it. Like, and the fact that I have rarely been so dissatisfied with the way everything works out for a series of main characters, because it's like they're constantly just stumbling into everything going well for them, and it's like, well, I know that the argument that the showrunners might make is, well, obviously fate is on their side, but that honestly looks just like the writer is on their side.
Yeah, I have to say, by the time I got halfway through the second season, I would say that it's probably one of the most grossly miscast excuses for a show I've ever seen.
Wow.
All of the characters, which are awesome, which have interesting arcs, which have great acting, are the questionable villain and all the minor characters.
I know. I mean, John Smith doing a great job.
Yes. Case in
Rufus
point.
Sewell is doing a great job this year. Like, the arc he goes through is, I think, along with Carahiroyuki Tagawa's Journey in Another Dimension, which I really enjoyed. That was my second favorite part of the season.
Another minor character.
Yeah, just killing it. You know?
Just so much more interesting than,
Our
you know,
leads.
Frank, who's a wiener.
Yep. And Juliana, who just stumbles into everything going perfectly for her all of the time without her putting in any effort. It's like...
The most bland, generic, every heroine I've ever seen.
I mean, the worst part is, right, it's this crazy depiction of resistance and all of this where it's like, it imagines this crazy situation where if you do the most morally pure and righteous thing all of the time, somehow everything will just work out. It imagines, like, trying to take on 2 global empires simultaneously without ever having to make any moral compromises.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, that seems like a ridiculous Pollyanna fantasy, doesn't it?
Yeah. Like I said, like, okay, the shop owner is a more interesting character than Juliana Crane.
Honestly, I'm loving the shop owner. I mean, him and I didn't understand what... Oh god, what is Frank's best friend's name?
Oh, I know who you're talking about. The guy played by DJ Qualls.
DJ Qualls' character. Okay,
DJ
Qualls' character. Who,
awesome.
I watched the whole first season, I'm like, why is he here? And then it's like, the stuff they do with him and Mr. Childan in the second season, I'm like, okay, I want more of their adventures.
I would watch a spin-off of just them doing this sort of shit.
Doing they're trying to make their way in this world and being, con men about antiques. And it's like, all of this stuff, I am finding this so compelling, so much more than Frank Frink's insistence on, like, just whining all the time about everything.
It's a constant low drone.
Yeah, I'm just like, ugh. Nothing about the world is fair. Everything is awful, and I'm just going to be dark about it. Like, this emo nonsense isn't accomplishing anything, Frank. Like, everybody around you is, like, doing things to try and survive. And you're just like, I don't care if the whole world blows up. Yeah, well, that's not, making for a compelling main character, Frank.
Yeah, Frank, I appreciate that, things are hard, but things are hard for everyone.
Every single character in this world has gone through something as bad as you have, or in some cases worse.
Yes, in
all
many cases. Even the main bad guy has gone through worse shit than you have.
Yes, he has. And so why do you get to complain about everything all of the time? Why do you get to be the one who decides what's fair and what's unfair? Just do your frigging best. And I mean, and you got the one thing where it's like, you got this lady who, she's Japanese, but she's American Japanese, so she's just as filthy to the Japanese as all of the white people are. And yet Frank, and that's obviously the situation, yet Frank is horrible to her.
Yeah.
Like,
Frank
she's
is
not the
literally
problem.
the worst hero.
Yeah, no, he's terrible. He really is terrible. And it's so frustrating.
I know.
Yeah. Oh my god.
It's infuriating.
Yeah.
To listen to him being like, oh, well, I've had a hard life. I've been locked up by the Japanese. Bitch, everyone's been locked up by the Japanese.
You were locked up by the Japanese for a very small amount of time. We're all sad about what happened to your family, but come on. There are bigger fish to fry. You know?
You have important things to do this instant, which will keep your friends from being killed.
Yeah, and you are so hesitant. And God, and every time something like... I guess the thing that frustrates me most about the show is how naive everyone is about the cost of what do you call it? About like what it's going to cost to have this kind of revolution, right? Because he finds out that it's like they killed 2 Japanese guards, right? And it's like, and so as a result, 20 innocent people were murdered, and he's like, we can't let that happen. It's like, that's what they do. That's what they've been doing this whole time. Japan has been running things for 20 years at this point, and it's always been, whenever something happens, there's a mass execution. And yet they have him acting like he's surprised that this is the consequences of their actions.
Yeah, like the only person who seems to have any idea of what's going on,
yeah,
is Smith.
Yeah,
he's like,
he's
I know
the one
exactly
who gets the stakes.
Yep,
100%. He gets the stakes right from jump.
Yep, and
yeah.
like his arc going into the first season is really compelling.
Okay, well, don't tell me too much, because I will, before we talk about this again, I'll just completely finish the show. We're not going to try and spin out for a whole season 3. I accidentally called 2 buckets. But yeah, but you're saying it keeps getting better, the stuff they do with John.
His arc is pretty much the only reason I'm watching anymore.
Well,
I'm just
it's so fascinating. And it's like, what bothers me was, so she goes to New York and she gets in with his family, right?
Yeah.
And she becomes and spies on them for the resistance. And then you get this ridiculous storyline with Tate Donovan, where like she can't trust Tate Donovan, blah 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 blah, and they want her to be on the right side of this, and she shoots Tate Donovan, and they try to murder her, blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
And what frustrates me about it is, like, in order for her to be the good guy in this situation, they have to have the rest of the resistance being just idiots, because they get information that John Smith has, covered up his son having muscular dystrophy, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, it tragically at the end of the season, the son turns himself to be executed for the state. And I mean, if there's a thing where it's like, oh well, you're going to turn him and his wife against the state, that's going to be what does it. But his son turns himself in to be executed by the state because he doesn't want to become an eater, right? And so they have evidence that John Smith did this, and honestly, if you pulled the thread a tiny, murdered a man to cover up his son's condition.
Yeah.
And Tate Donovan's reaction is, oh, well, let's just broadcast this now and have them kill the guy. Like, he's such an idiot that he doesn't see the massive advantage they have of having severe blackmail information on the most powerful Nazi in America.
The head of the SS.
The head of the SS in America, they have crucial blackmail information on him. And Tate Donovan's reaction is, oh, well, let's just have them execute him right now, so whoever they replace him with, we won't have blackmail information on.
Yeah. It's...
Is this your first day as the head of the Resistance?
First day of the head of Resistance, and you fucked it up real bad.
Really badly!
Like if this is how the Resistance has been run, I'm not surprised that the Nazis just walked all over everyone.
Exactly! And that's the thing. In order to get Juliana walking away like she's the good guy, they have to have everybody else be a complete idiot. But then again, that's Juliana's entire storyline the entire time.
It is true.
It's like all of reality falls over itself to make sure everything goes okay for Juliana. And the minute we notice this, we have the characters say that all of reality is twisting itself to make sure everything goes okay for Juliana. I mean, Karahiro Kutigawa basically says that she's the only person that matters in all realities.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. You know what, though?
What?
I just thought of this.
Yeah?
What they need to do is make a supercut of the show, which is you've removed all of Juliana and Frank.
And boom! Just like really compelling stuff about Childan and the trade minister and John Smith and what they're up to. And honestly, and Joe's got some good adventures going on too.
Yeah.
They're not great, but they're at least interesting because we find out what's going on with Nazi high command, and it's all pretty dramatic, and we get details of like the what the youth of the interesting idea of what's it like growing up as the power elite of the new Nazi empire of the Third Reich, and like that's some interesting stuff, right? I mean, it gets a little broad. It's like, oh, let's have a bunch of nudity and an LSD trip. Okay, we get you're on cable. You know?
You're trying
that.
so hard to be stars.
You really are. But at the same time, like, it's not an uninteresting character. Like, the woman he hangs out with is like, it's not an interesting character, and I am interested to see how these people justify themselves. And this whole idea of like, okay, yes, we'll kill 30% of the world's population, but from then on, only white people exist. So obviously everything will be fine from then on. Like the logic of the Nazis.
Yeah.
Ooh.
But, literally everyone but Frank is worth watching.
Oh, absolutely. And like I said, Juliana's stuff is kind of frustrating at times. But even that storyline, because it's so tied in on one side of the dimensional divide, it's so tied in with the trade minister's story, and on the other side, it's so tied in with John's story, right? That you're kind of interested to see where it's going.
I think you're interested to see where it's going, specifically because of those other better characters and their adventures.
Yeah, I think that's true. And Juliana, like, and the weird part is, and I don't know where it's going to go going forward, but as a side character linking these various people together, I see her more as a plot device than as a full character. Because
she could have the full-on NPC face and nothing would change.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying, right? Because it's like the fact that she's never challenged in any meaningful way is what bothers me. You know, like the fact that every time, and that's what, like all of these characters being forced to go up against an impossible situation and making like these tough choices to, you know, put themselves at risk, put their families at risk, to do like the hard thing for the betterment of the world. And with her, it's literally just, she's just kind of there and everything works out for her. You know? Because it's like, what principles does she have to give up? You know?
She is essentially a plot device.
Yeah.
And
it's like, I can't tell you about... And then at the end, oh, her sister from another dimension's still kicking around. Okay?
So nothing. The only meaningful consequence she's ever suffered...
Yeah. Is? Oh, you're saying the sister, yes. And now even that got unwound. I mean, I don't know how they're going to unwind. I haven't watched season 3 yet. I don't know how they're going to do it. But it's like, the idea that you thought a good way to end season 2 was the only, like, defining thing of her life we've just taken away? Why did you think that was a good idea? You already have to know the problems with this character. But, you know, you don't seem to see... I mean, maybe they honestly don't see the issue here. Like, I don't know where they're going with this character. Although I can't imagine it's any place good, because you've already spoiled for me the only thing keeping you watching is what they're doing with John Smith. So, I don't have the highest hopes for where this is going from here on.
I'll be honest. John Smith has so far the best
arc for any series character overall.
Yeah, the series.
Okay. Well, I'm not surprised. I mean, Rufus Sewell, he's knocking it out of the park. He's doing a great job. Just as an actor. But what they had that character go through, first with finding out that it's like, that just because the Nazis have taken over, it doesn't mean they're stopped being behind-the-scenes wrangling. It doesn't mean that suddenly everything is utopian. No, like, there's still these internecine wars within the Nazi Party for who's going to be the future of the Nazi Party, and... That's supposed to... It's like... And right there, right in the first episode, he has to face the idea of, if ours is the best possible way of running things, why are my own people trying to execute me? Right? Why are my own people trying to execute me in the middle of the thing? Like, if we've really figured it out, why are people still killing and dying to keep this thing running? Like, why are they doing all of these murders? And so he's got this, like, dilemma right there in the first episode that has, you know, created this arc for him that I've been fascinated by for the first 2 seasons. And you're telling me it only gets better from here.
It only does get better when it comes to him. And Childers, the store owner.
Childan. Robert Childan.
Yeah.
He goes some interesting places too. Okay, well, don't tell me any more about that. But because it's like he's such a tiny part of the show, but every time he gets his own scene, I love it so much, and his internal stuff, right? It's like how he's internalized. In order to survive, he's internalized the idea that he is genetically, right? That he is fundamentally, there is something fundamentally wrong with his culture. That he is less than the people he works for, and he has completely transformed himself as a person to try and turn himself into one of them.
Yeah.
Like, to be of any value. And it's like, watching him try to survive in that world, and every time... Like, he's such a scumbag when we first meet him, but you can't help but feel for this man every time he gets this brutal reminder that, no, he isn't. Like... He can go to, like, they can come to his thing, and he can get invited to their functions, and blah 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 blah, and they will take his services, but he is not one of them.
He's not one of them, and every time he tries to be,
he gets beaten down for it. Every time he forgets his place, he suffers, and it's fascinating. And I love what they're doing with that character, and I'm glad to hear he gets plenty more screen time, because at the end of Season 2, he and DJ Qualls get on a bus out of town, and I'm like, is this their bus out of the show? I certainly hope not. But it is. Okay, good. All right.
Thankfully.
Well, that nope has really, sold me on something good happening down the line, so thank you for that.
Well, problem is you still have to suffer through
all of Juliana and all of Frank's stuff, yes.
Yeah, good news about Frank, though.
Okay, good. I am glad to hear that. All right, don't tell me anymore.
No, there's just less of it than you think. There's a lot less of his whining.
Oh, thank God. I'm very happy to hear that. It's interesting when I'm watching the show, the thing that gets me is how you have to... for the entire first season, I'm like... Why do they say pawn over and over and over again? Right? And then I thought back to the book and the world we live in. I'm like, oh, okay. They had to make up their own racial slur. Okay. And honestly, for the entire first season, I didn't get that they had made up their own racial slur. Because you can't use either of the two historically accurate racial slurs, because they're still racial slurs to this day. And I gotta say, that's a relatively elegant way of dealing with the situation, but I feel kind of silly, because I didn't realize that was what they were doing the entire first season.
Yeah, no, there's just some things you can't say.
No, and honestly, shouldn't. I'm glad they're not saying it. But it did. I will admit that I was confused for the whole first season. Only the second season. Oh, okay, because it's the second half of Nipponese. Gotcha. Okay, that's fine. That's completely fine. Yeah, and I gotta say, I don't know where they're going with the alternate dimension stuff, but I will say that as ridiculous as how fast planes were flying in the because from the moment that he realizes what's going on, and that his dad is going to blow up the whole world, basically, to preserve the Aryan race. It's pretty terrifying. But the way the show is edited, it feels like there are, between him finding out about the plan and, finding out he has to get the film, finding out about the existence of the film, getting the film to New York, getting the film from New York to Germany, all of that, it feels like they don't understand how long it takes planes to fly. And I know they have supersonic Nazi jets flying quickly, but even still, the mechanics of moving that tape across that film across the entire world over the course of one episode just seems preposterously fast-paced. I feel like they put too low a number on the ticking clock for it to be really plausible. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think there's also just it's it's just not very well written.
No, there's that. And I mean, I do like the cleverness that really only fits with us, the viewer in the present day real world, of them using the footage of Bikini Atoll to stop a world war.
Yeah, that was kind of a neat twist.
Yeah,
I'll give them that.
I didn't see that coming.
But
I thought that was a neat twist. But you're right that it's not elegantly written. It's not very well put together. The end of the season is incredibly rushed.
Yeah.
And that didn't help it at all.
Well, if they had reduced the sheer amount of Frank's whining.
Frank's whining in that side plot about their attempting to sabotage the heavy water production facility in San Francisco, all of that, and then the whole thing about the bomb. And honestly, you're right. If Frank wasn't there as a character, there is so much more time to develop everything else that's going on. But if Frank's not there, I was about to say, how do you figure out what's going on in Japan, in the San Francisco stuff? Well, you give Robert a lot more to do. You give DJ Qualls a lot more to do. And I think it ends up being more compelling. But I think
it's richer for this.
It does, right? And that's the problem with Frank is how is he this? And that's what's frustrating about me. I think because you've talked me through this, I think I know what's pissing me off most about the two central characters of the show is that Frank and Juliana are both so frustratingly naive about everything all the time.
Yeah.
And that's what gets me. And it doesn't make sense for the world that this show is set in. That they would be so naive all of the time about everything.
That and the fact that it doesn't make a lot of sense. Well, he grew up, under Nazi rule, and she grew up under Japanese rule.
Yeah.
They should...
They should have a better sense.
Mass execution? That's never happened before.
Persecution of the Jews? Huh? Like, your last name is Frank. The secret Jewish culture is such news to him. Like, dude, you're like 28, 29 years old. You remember when this all went down. It wasn't that long ago that the takeover happened. You were already, 10 years old when all of this started. So you remember a world before all of this. You can't be this naive about how awful your circumstances are. But both of them are so weirdly naive about everything. And that's what makes it so frustrating. All of the other characters, they at first accept their part in the world, right? And they know it's a bad world, but they have made compromises to live in it. And then they start getting pushed to a breaking point, right? Whereas these two seem to be constantly learning everything all the time. Like, it's all so fresh for them. And I think it's because the show thinks we need this explained to us, but I'm going to speak for the audience now and say, it ain't that complicated.
Yeah. Nazis bad. Nazis
bad. Imperial Japanese forces bad. We get it. Let's get into the drama. So, I noticed something. Well, first off, I have to drop back to the Terror for 1 second. Because I noticed something. And by the way, after seeing all this stuff about, the Imperial Japanese Army and all this, I'm kind of excited when I finally get around to watching Season 2 of The Terror, since it's about an internment camp.
It is
I'm
pretty
interested
good.
to see where that goes. Well, of course it was going to be pretty good. It's Season 2 of The Terror. I trust these guys. But anyway, I noticed something about The Terror that we didn't talk about when we were talking about The Terror, right?
Oh.
And I noticed something. I was rewatching part of it. That last episode is amazing.
It is so good.
Such an amazing hour of television. But I will say something, and I realized we missed, we were talking about all of the ways that they are too sure of themselves and too comfortable with their worldview, and so, complete in their belief that the world is exactly the way they want it to, and nothing can go wrong, and their way is right. And it's all of the mistakes the captain makes of not sending back for help that first winter. Right before that first winter, and then the second winter. But I realized within it, we had been missing something amazing, which is so Crozier and other people, they have met Inuit in the past,
Yeah.
right? He speaks the language, right?
Yeah.
And yet every single one of these characters still uses the term Eskimo.
I know.
It's such a subtle thing. He speaks Inuktitut. He knows that Inuktitut means language of the Inuk. He knows that. He knows they're called the Inuk.
Very much aware, yes.
But all of them still say Eskimo. Because, and this is the key part, it's the first word they learned. And it's like, well, if it's information we have, it must be right. We can't change our view of anything ever. Because that would be admitting we didn't know everything.
Yeah. Therefore, we will keep on
using a racial slur to describe these people. Because it's the first word we heard for them.
Yep.
That's amazing, and that's the kind of subtle storytelling that is completely missing from something like this show. I know it was awkward how I tried to bring that back, and it doesn't really bring it back at all. But it's true. It's like it's this kind of subtle storytelling that when you watch a show as thuddingly obvious as
Man in the High Castle.
Man in the High Castle, you really find yourself missing. But yeah, I noticed that and I wanted to share it with you because it was one thing we hadn't talked about because I didn't notice until very recently.
Yeah,
but yeah, amazing show.
It is a great show in every way that The Man in the High Castle is not.
Yeah, there you go. So here's a fun behind the scenes, slightly gossipy thing. The star of Man in the High Castle, Alexa Davalos.
Yep.
Now married to Josh Stewart.
Who's that?
The bad guy from Punisher Season 2.
Oh.
Yeah. And like, they got married right before Punisher Season 2 aired. I'm like, did they meet on Punisher Season 2? It's just so weird, because they had one scene together in Punisher Season 2, and they got married, like, 5 months after shooting that scene. And it's like, I wonder, did they already know each other? Like, what happened there? But yeah, those two actors from that one scene are currently got married not that long after that filming that scene, and it makes me wonder, like, did they meet on that show? And it would be such a weird thing for them to meet on that show and get married, considering they had basically just the one scene together. But yeah,
well,
I just thought that was mildly interesting.
That is interesting.
Yeah, and yeah, sorry, you were going to say.
In further good news, The Expanse renewed for season 5. Most
surprising
likely season
0
6.
people. Like, I will say this: Jeff Bezos is obviously an evil man making the world a worse place every day. Like, we just know that is a factual statement about Jeff Bezos. He's a terrible person. The man is buying $100 million house. $100 million house.
If I had $100 million, I'd probably also buy a $100 million house.
That is not true, because then you would have no money left. If you had $100 billion, then yes, you would buy a $100 million house.
Yeah, you know
That's
what I mean.
why no one should have $100 billion. The
market wants what it wants.
That's not true at all. But that's a conversation for another time. But I will say, he might be an evil human being who's trying to destroy the world. But I agree 100% with his taste in television. And every now and then, in the same way that the Gilded Age got us all of the great architecture of the turn of the century, in the same way that, ultra-rich, like, essentially country-running merchants in the 17th century got us all of the great art of the Renaissance.
Yeah.
This man is paying for some incredible television.
This man is a patron of the arts.
Yes, I'm not saying that it's good for the society or the planet, but I will say he is every now and then doing the right thing with his money. And The Expanse is a perfect example of that.
Season 4 is really good.
Yeah. I have just started it, and I'm loving it, and we're going to be back to talk about Season 4 soon. So that should be a ton of fun.
But
Also, should we make some recommendations?
um, yeah, I'm gonna actually recommend Plague Tale: Innocence, or if you prefer,
Such a good game.
Continental Last of Us.
Yes. It's so good.
It is.
Yeah, one of my favorite games of have you beat it yet?
No, I
Okay.
just got it on Sunday.
Oh, okay. So yeah, it's a good long game. The levels take about 90 minutes each to beat, except for a couple of short dream levels. There's, 15, 16 levels in the game. So yeah, I mean it's a good 20-hour game, depending on how much time you spend, taking in these beautiful environments, and how long the puzzles take you. But yeah, it's beautiful. In case you haven't heard of it, it is a game about the plague attacking medieval France, and the daughter of a knight has to take her ailing brother on a cross-country journey when they are hunted by the French version of the Inquisition, like French Inquisitioners who want the brother for nefarious reasons that I'm not going to get into.
Yep. So it's like
Okay.
The Last of Us, but with less swearing.
Considerably less swearing, and I would say almost no combat. I think you compared it to the Ellie section of Last of Us.
Yes, that
Winter
is
from Last of
Yep.
Us.
where you're hunting, or the section where she's escaping. You really don't have to kill anyone.
Yeah, exactly. Like these sequences, because I mean, for all of the scary stealth stuff in the Ellie sequences, she also headshots a ton of people with a bow and arrow.
Yeah, and when she's escaping from David, she knifes 80 people.
I know. Yeah, that takes a turn. But it's still a great sequence, and this, you're right, it's that feel stretched out to an entire game, and I personally adore it. I find it to be, it's an eerie game. The character stuff is great. The world is great. It looks gorgeous.
It really does.
Yeah, it's not stretching for crazy amounts of realism, and it looks beautiful. I was amazed at how well the game plays out, and again, I'm not going to tell you anything that's coming, but suffice to say, it only gets better as it goes on. What was the last thing you did in the game? I'm curious.
I'm still sort of poking around. I just beat the guy with the club.
Okay.
Essentially the first boss.
I'm going to spoil one thing for you. That's the only boss in the game. That's not completely true, but there is another boss, but the mechanic you learned about knocking off armor to defeat a guy,
Yep.
that mechanic, that never comes up again.
Wow.
Yeah, the way it's introduced, it feels like, okay, so for the rest of the game, there's going to be club dudes, you're going to have to do this. But no, the game is not interested in that kind of combat. That really was just a one-time thing. If you think there's going to be a bunch more bosses, there isn't. There are boss-type encounters, but that's the only, combat boss in the game. The rest of the time, they find much more elegant solutions for, keeping all of the boss fights stealth-ish themed. Yeah, so, no, it's very interesting. The game's design only gets more interesting the further you go. But yes, especially the rat mechanics.
I'm looking forward to it. I
Yeah.
was charmed within a couple of hours.
Yeah,
I
it's
just
a
got
really
back from
good
the
game.
north, so I've had data for a couple of days,
So you're just now installing all the stuff you missed out on.
pretty much.
Okay.
But
Yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
fantastic. I agree with you 100%. It is worth everybody's time, and I was so happy to review this thing. I called it one of the best games of last year. I loved it.
it was as bad as the Division 2 was. Sorry, it's
Good as
good.
the Division 2 was bad.
Yes. Because
Damn.
oh man,
Yeah,
That was-
Division had its problems, and Division 2 learned from none of the Division's mistakes.
it actually. I was shocked to see the Division 2 fully regress,
I know.
full on.
Yeah.
They're just you know what? We're gonna take all the charm, all the personality out of New York.
And give you the most bland location imaginable.
Yep.
That's so true.
We got some mercenaries. Everyone likes mercenaries. Know what you're getting
God.
into.
Oh god. All right. So yes. Oh, and I'll make one recommendation. I watched Chernobyl, and I'm going to remind everybody to watch Chernobyl. It's fantastic. I know that Jared Harris, like his whole thing is just being the star of prestige TV shows, but just because you've seen him be the star of a bunch of prestige TV shows doesn't mean he's anything but fantastic. And yeah, 100%, you should absolutely check out that show as well.
I think that's part of it. We are not properly rationing Jared Harris.
We're just jamming through too many of the things too quickly.
Yeah, that's why he wasn't in The Expanse this last season, essentially.
Oh, I'm so sad he's not in The Expanse at all. He was so good on The Expanse.
Well, he can only be so many places at once.
That's true. That's true.
And, like,
all right, so
this is how we got The Terror
that's
and
true.
Chernobyl.
You're right.
So
you're right. All right, so we're gonna call it here. We will see you back here for more games and either Expanse Season 4 or the rest of Man in the High Castle. So that should be a ton of fun. We'll see who here for that. But until then, I'm going to say au revoir.